Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us tonight. Heather Hyland is the Public Information Officer for the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District, with over 15 years of experience working for several cities and agencies in Southern California. Heather has 10 years of experience in public health outreach programs. Her passion for educating the public about the science behind vector control and public health has allowed Heather to develop nationally recognized public health and educational programs. Heather believes that outreach and education will play a key role in ensuring a sustainable relationship with the community she serves. And without further notice, let's turn it over to Heather.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Thank you so much for taking time today to be here for the Discovery Cube series and to listen to me talking about the world's most dangerous animal. Not your brothers or sisters. They're the second most dangerous animal. But the number one animal is mosquitoes. They actually have the capability to transmit diseases, and over 1 million people can die a year from some of the diseases that they do transmit. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint. I'm going to be talking about mosquitoes in Orange County, but the discussion of the 80s mosquito is what I'm going to be talking about the most, and what you need to know how to protect yourself and your family members. So I didn't know if you know this, but there are over 3,500 species of mosquitoes around the world. There are 176 species right here in the United States, and there are 53 species of different types of mosquitoes in California, 26 species here in Orange County. So the most common that you will see in Orange County is the culex. So we call them quinkies. And they're the kind of the brown mosquitoes that you see coming out to bite at dusk and dawn. And then we'll be talking about the new invasive species, the 80s mosquito. And these are a little bit smaller than our native species. They're black and white striped. They bite during the day, and they're very aggressive with how they bite. Even one little female 80s mosquito, you think you might have 10 in your yard or 10 inside your house, but actually one can bite you several times. So they are cluster feeders. So just a little bit about the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District. We actually, a lot of people don't know that we were established in 1947, but that there are over 80 mosquito or vector control districts in California alone. And we are run by a 35-member board of trustees, 34 from each city and 1 from the county. So every city has a say in what we do. And we serve over 3.2 million residents, over 800 square miles, and unincorporated areas. Okay. So this was an older one. I took some stuff out, so I'm just going to go straight to this area. So high-risk areas in Orange County, approximately 94% of all West Nile virus in Orange County are in this high-risk area. So the different high-risk areas are below La Habra, Fullerton, Buena Park, Anaheim, Garden Grove, Orange, Santa Ana, Tustin, and Huntington Beach. So if you live in any of those cities, I highly suggest you go to ocvector.org and subscribe to our e-alert system. And that way you will get any alerts from us about West Nile virus findings, any time that we're treating, even for typhus. We will let you know if any disease has been found in any animal in Orange County that we test for. So this is just showing you the map that we usually post when we first find the first human infection, if we're finding birds that have West Nile virus. But you'll see all the different cities where we find West Nile virus. And we're very transparent in all of our findings, all of our data. So what do we do? So we conduct wide area control. So if you'll see, we treat manholes, flood channels, and gutters. All of them are with EPA products. We mostly just use BTI, which is just a natural occurring bacteria, in granulate form or in powder form. And then with gutters, if you ever see our Jeeps, you can just wave to our inspectors. We're super friendly. And what we're spraying on top of that water is just a cocoa bear oil. It's a biodegradable oil. And what the oil does is it lays on top of the water and it suffocates mosquito larvae. So I don't know if you know this, but mosquito larvae have to go to the surface to get air, just like a whale or a dolphin would. So they actually have to go to the surface to get air, and then they'll go back down to feed on bacteria that's in dirty standing water. So we just put that layer on there and it does the job. We also, and when people hear this, they get a little grossed out, but we actually provide service to 3,000 out of service or non-functioning pools. So if you can see the letter B, that's a dirty pool you can see from the air, and the one down below is clean. So every year we take a helicopter and fly over Orange County to check for dirty pools. And the reason why we do is because we want to help that resident. We will go to their house and say, do you need our assistance? We will treat your pool monthly and make sure it's not breeding. A swimming pool, even with a little bit of water in it, like you see in this picture, can breed thousands of mosquitoes, and it can affect an entire neighborhood. We also have tons of resources. Like you saw here, you can subscribe and get our alerts. We have different languages too, if you need assistance with that. And why should we care about mosquitoes? Well, mosquitoes transmit diseases. We have a new invasive mosquito in town, and a few infected mosquitoes can actually cause a large outbreak. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that Elizabeth wanted to go on vacation and she said, I'm going to Costa Rica. See you later, Cube. And a mosquito bit her there with Zika. She could come back not even knowing that she had Zika, because it's about a 10-day incubation period of the virus. She could come home. Now we have this new invasive species that can transmit Zika, chikungunya, dengue fever, yellow fever. That mosquito can bite her. It can ingest the virus. It now is starting to bring the virus into its system, to its salivary glands. And that's how we actually get the virus. Is the mosquitoes, some of the viruses will transform to the salivary gland. And when they're biting us, they use their saliva to numb, and they use their saliva to thin our blood. So the virus goes straight into our bloodstream. Once that mosquito has the virus in its body, that mosquito locally can go to your neighbor and transmit Zika, et cetera, et cetera. Only female mosquitoes bite. So that female needs the blood to produce eggs. And I don't know if some people know that, some people don't. Only males do not bite. They usually just, they emerge, they get nectar, breed, and die in about a week. Females survive a little bit longer to lay the eggs. So that female can bite several people to produce eggs. So it's not just biting one person, it's biting several people, and they can contract that virus. Let's go past this. Okay. So West Nile virus is a virus that we historically have every year. West Nile virus actually comes from birds. So birds have West Nile virus. Our Culex mosquito, our native mosquito, prefers bird blood. So it will bite a human if necessary, but it usually goes for birds. So if a bird has West Nile virus, or that whole community, that whole flock, that whole group of birds has West Nile, the mosquito will feed on the birds. Then it can go to a horse, human, or even your pet and bite us already having the virus inside their body, and then we contract West Nile virus. Now, the good thing is that only 2% of people have severe symptoms. 20% will have, I would say, more like flu-like symptoms. And 78% usually have no symptoms. But if you have a virus in you, a vector-borne illness, it can have long-term effects. So let's talk about our southern house mosquito. This is our native species. This is one that comes out at dusk and dawn. I call it the barbecue biter. So if you're having a barbecue in the summer and you see little mosquitoes floating around, I always tell people the best thing to do is to wear repellent, or if you want, you can actually put a fan around where you're eating. Mosquitoes are very weak flyers. So I just put a fan, rotating fan around us when we're eating, and that usually can do the trick. The life cycle of the Culex is a little different from the invasive 80 species, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Over 100 larvae can fit in a capful of a water bottle, this small. So if you see on the left, I just zoomed it in, and you can see they can actually survive in a cap full of water. They're very resilient. And remember, these are prehistoric creatures, and they haven't changed a lot in the millions of years they've been existing on this earth. The cool thing about mosquitoes, I see some kids here, these are really cool adaptations of mosquitoes. They have 3 stomachs. They have 6 mouth parts. So it looks like they have 1 mouth part, but there's actually 6 inside that 1 mouth part, each with a little tool on it to get into our blood. So they'll use one to saw the skin open. I know that's gross, but it happens. They'll use another one to put the saliva on there so we don't feel them biting, so they can numb our skin. They use other body parts to actually sense where your bloodstream is. One as a needle to poke through the blood vessel. Then they're going to insert their saliva to thin the blood so they can get it out really fast. And they're using all those 6 magical mouth parts. And then they'll cover it with a large piece of skin to look like 1 mouth part. They use their antenna to sense our carbon dioxide. So we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide, and that's what they're smelling. They're also smelling our natural body odor. So some mosquitoes that like your odor for some reason will bite you more than your sister, brother, husband, whoever is near you. My husband never gets bit. I get bit. So I think it's because I just smell really good. I don't know. I'm a favorite of the mosquitoes. So mosquitoes will lay on top of the water. They actually have feet, and they have little hooks on their feet. So they can actually kind of float on the water, lay a group of eggs called egg rafts. And then after a couple of days, they hatch, they become larvae. They'll grow 4 times. It's called the instar stage. They'll turn into this pupa with little horns on it. And excuse me, the pupa will rotate around and spin around, go to the surface, and emerge into an adult. Hold on real fast, sorry. And the cool thing about a pupa is they don't eat during that period, which is just like a butterfly. So the mosquito goes through this metamorphosis just like a butterfly, the 4 stages of the life cycle. So it goes egg, larva, pupa, adult. The pupa will actually flatten out on top of the surface of the water, emerge into the adult. And this happens in 5 to 7 days, only 5 to 7 days. Butterflies take weeks. This is a fast metamorphosis, faster than any insect. Dragonflies, even when they go into their nymph stage, it takes longer. Dragonflies actually eat mosquitoes. So they are one of I am a #1 fan, dragonflies. So new species in Orange County. We have the yellow fever mosquito, the Asian tiger mosquito, and the Australian backyard mosquito. I'm just like, 3? You're gonna give me 3? All of these have the potential to transmit new diseases. And these are the 80 species. You can see they're black and white striped, and they're aggressive biters. They bite during the day, and they lay eggs very differently. And I'm going to show you this. This was one of our first in 2015 when we discovered the first yellow fever mosquitoes. I think we all just were pretty shocked, and we just I worked for Greater Los Angeles Vector Control, and Orange County called us and said, "Thanks, LA. You gave us the 80s," but I'll tell you how the 80s mosquito actually got here. So they were discovered in 2015. Mission Viejo called us, and when we discovered them, we found out that there was a person growing bromeliads, and bromeliads are these very tropical plants, and at the top, it holds water. And there were a lot of eggs on these plants that came from the port, unknowingly. This person was selling them in a nursery. So if you're selling a plant in a nursery that has eggs, all of the people in Orange County are going to buy those plants. And that's how that mosquito can spread. So how did they get here? On lucky bamboo plants and other tropical plants from the ports. Long Beach Port, and I do remember this, started discovering when they were starting to hatch inside the boats, that's when they said, okay, I think something's going on here. These eggs are so tiny, you can barely notice them. So I'll show you. This is 80s as of 2019. You can see they were found in all 28 cities in 2019. Now, as of today, if you see how they've been growing, now in 2020, they're in every city in Orange County. Just some facts. They're non-native to California. Like I said, they're invasive, black and white striped. They do breed indoors and outdoors. So that's something that we've really had to transition when it comes to outreach, is now telling people they are indoor breeders. We have found them breeding in refrigerator filters. We have found them breeding in the Keurig coffee filters at the bottom, because they only need a little bit of water. We have found them breeding in drains in the bathroom, like in guest bathrooms that no one really uses at the time. We have found them in a lot of different drains in the backyard that haven't been flushed out. We have found them in dog bowls, in pet bowls, indoors. And one woman was complaining so bad about, she just could not get rid of the mosquitoes. We found that she was growing cuttings. So she was getting houseplants, cutting them and putting them in mason jars. And all of those mason jars were breeding Aedes mosquitoes. So you really have to look now, not only indoors, outdoors. And I'm sure people have been complaining about it, but I do have to say our outreach has changed because we conduct wide area control. So we have control over that. We don't have control over everyone's backyards. And these are backyard breeding mosquitoes. They tend to lay eggs in small containers. They do favor human blood. So they're going to be around more humans, not animals like birds, like our culex. And they're going to be indoors, and they favor the indoors. So here's the life cycle. The life cycle can happen within 5 to 7 days. And here's the issue is that, dun, 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 Aedes can lay eggs without water. They can lay eggs on dry containers, knowing that there is some calcium deposit on there from water that used to be there. And so the female will sense that with her antenna, lay eggs in dry places, knowing that water was once there. So let's say you had a bucket out there for a couple years, even up to 5 years, they can stay viable. So if it rained or your child ends up filling it up, in 5 days, those eggs can hatch after years of being dormant. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's how they've spread, is that a rain can come and just, they'll start to emerge like crazy. These are some breeding sources that we're finding. Plant saucers. If you don't need plant saucers, if you're not on a deck or somewhere where you don't necessarily need them because of the drainage, I highly suggest you don't use plant saucers. If you do need saucers, I know some HOAs require them because of water damage. Mine does, my HOA does. So I have started a group where we put some money together and we put tiny gravel in the saucers so that they don't, the water doesn't start to rise and they can lay eggs in there. Tires, we see them a lot in tires, broken fountains. The issue with fountains is fountains are very expensive, but the pumps are very cheaply made. So they break a lot and people don't really know what to do. You can always call us and we can come and treat the fountain or put mosquito fish in there if there's enough water. And the mosquito fish will eat the mosquito larvae naturally. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. So here's just the difference between our native species versus invasive. So you can see the culex loves larger sources of water. They bite at dusk and dawn. They lay eggs differently that require water. And they do live outdoors. The new invasive species tend to breed in backyard sources. They bite during the day. What? Individual eggs that can stay viable for years. And they tend to favor the indoors as well. So prevent a mosquito takeover. Inspect your yard regularly. We do have many resources online. We have a DIY mosquito page and a hunting source for kids where they can go and do a little breeding source hunt with its little pirate activity. This is what I ended up doing. I got a huge Rubbermaid bin and stored all the kids' toys in there. Kids' toys will breed, especially kiddie swimming pools. Get rid of standing water around your home. So these are, I listed below. Our inspectors will go out and this is what they find the most will breed. These are the common items that we see. Mosquito fish are superheroes. This is a great way to fight mosquitoes in your backyard. If you have a pond or a large form of water, even a pool, we will put mosquito fish in there. And if you guys ever want, well, we have COVID right now, but if you ever want to come and see our facility, we actually have a hatchery of mosquito fish and we will breed over 100,000 mosquito fish a year to help minimize the larvae population all over Orange County. And these guys are brilliant. I call them like the Avenger fish. Like he's just like Avengers assist. They go right through those mosquito larvae. They will eat hundreds a day. So you can always call us if you have a body of water that you need help with. Our inspector will drop off a big bag of mosquito fish and we have a form for you to fill out and it will give you all the information you need for them. What can you do to protect you and your family? Don't invite them in your home. I highly suggest you check your screens. I had a huge hole in my screen for my dog scratching it, the sliding door, and Aedes mosquitoes were getting in that way. They can get in through the tiniest holes. Repair holes in your screens, use air conditioning when available, wear insect repellent. Aedes mosquitoes, these guys, if you're wearing leggings, I always wear leggings when I go hiking, they can bite through leggings. They're aggressive biters. They can bite through clothing if it's tightly up against your skin. I just spray my pants with insect repellent. And you have to kind of check the ingredients. I know a lot of people like the natural ingredients, but it has to be EPA approved because that way it's arm tested. They've tested mosquitoes on this certain ingredient. DEET, Picaridin, IR 3535, oil of lemon eucalyptus is a natural one that you can use. So that's something that I use. You can get it at any store. If you just look at the brand, it's bright yellow. And I mean, that's pretty much the best way, even indoors and outdoors, to protect yourself. Cover up. You can wear light colored long sleeve clothing when outdoors. I like to wear long sleeve just because that's how I am. But if some people get hot, you can just put repellent on. And we're available for Q&A. I also want to, I have it right here. California Mosquito Awareness Week is next week, April 19th through the 23rd. If you go to any of our social media portals, you just look up at OC Vector. We are giving away a giveaway a day. So you can win a $25 Panera gift card and a huge picnic pack from us. And all you have to do is subscribe to our email alert system, or you can become an advocate or add us to your social media. It will have all the rules on our social media, but you can win that. And I highly suggest you go to the website if you need any resources. And we are opening up a new extension of our exhibit at the Discovery Cube. And it's going to be a new 80s station to tell you a little bit more about the invasive species. And we have the bite zone. So kids, get ready for the bite zone. There is a spray that you can get at Home Depot. It's called Yard Guard. It is, you'd have to look at the directions, but it's not very, it's not permanent. So I suggest it to people if they're going to have a barbecue and they just do not want people getting bit. I would spray this around your yard, but it only works for about 10 hours. So I would say if you're having a barbecue, use it, but it's not for daily use. Something that you can do is I would just say to wear repellent. Just check your yard for breeding sources. If you really cannot find breeding sources, mosquitoes don't have a very long flight radius. So it's probably one of your neighbors, and you can always put a brochure or you can give us their address just to I mean, I don't want to create any conflict with neighbors, but you can talk to them and just be an advocate and say, hey, I'm getting bit. I did this to my neighbors. It wasn't a big deal. I just said, hey, I'm getting bit. I checked my yard. It's got to be somewhere around here. Can you check your yard? But a lot of the times it's in the weirdest places that you'll find them breeding. But I would only suggest the yard guard. There's nothing really else that you can spray. There is one more product that I looked up that was more natural. And as a government agency, I can't really say it, but if you Google natural spray for mosquitoes, something like that, there is one product that I have heard of, but it just hasn't been tested, so I can't really suggest it. But I know Yard Guard works. But I think if you don't want any other insects dying, it will kill those other insects, any flying insect. Candles do not work. And I was so sad when I ended up starting to work with mosquitoes. The apps don't work. The vibrating app that people bring up, that doesn't work either. Candles are hard because mosquitoes will be attracted to you no matter what. If that you'd have to go right up to the candle like this. That candle will only work if you were tightly up against it. But the problem is that the mosquito will be deterred by that smell. But if they're smelling the CO2 that's not even really near that smell, they'll still bite you. So what I do now is I literally just wear the oil of lemon eucalyptus spray, and it really works. If you have a rotating fan that is on you, mosquitoes are weak flyers. So I just get a rotational fan. I've gotten 2 before, and I just aim it at us when we're eating outdoors. The fans that you clip to your waist will only work around your waist. If you have the wristbands, it's only going to work in that area where it's near you, because the mosquito will say, oh, I'm not going to land near the wrist where that smell is. I'm just going to go over here near the cheek or the neck, the area that doesn't have the spray on it. I've even gotten bitten where, like in a crease where I didn't have the repellent on me near my watch. People have gotten, and we've actually done tests on this on the Dynatrex. Those really large ones work so great for every insect, even male mosquitoes, except female mosquitoes. You might get a couple that will go towards that, but the only thing that will really work, and they're very expensive, is a CO2 trap. And I think they run about $500 to $600, but it's getting the propane tank and reversing the propane to actually put out a CO2 smell, that gas. And it traps them pretty well. But I'll tell you, after I got bit so bad by 80s, I said, well, Amazon, like I might even get one just to even test it more with our lab and see if it really works that well. But with our CO2 traps, we don't necessarily use them to trap. We use them for surveillance, but they do work because we put dry ice on top of our traps, and it has the CO2 in the dry ice. The Aedes mosquito has adapted very well to urban environments. And even in our high-risk cities where we find a lot of West Nile, that's mostly due to bird population and where they're migrating, where they're going. West Nile virus is found in a lot of crows, ravens, sparrows, and mourning doves. So if you have a very condensed population, you're going to have more apartments, more areas that are going to have potted plants. So that's what we're seeing. Is we found a very large Aedes population in an area in Fullerton that was surrounded. It was a very condensed area where a lot of people had potted plants and bamboo plants. And we did find several spas that were out of service in that area. So it's all due to also plants moving, people renting and moving the plants that already have the eggs on them. We're just seeing this mosquito, and they're so hard to control because they come out during the day. The only time that we're technically allowed to spray, and if you look at our integrated vector management program, our number one is outreach and education, and then it trickles down into surveillance, mosquito fish, biological control, source reduction, and then chemical control is our last resort. And it's also due to mosquitoes having high resistance to chemicals, just like cockroaches. The resistance is hard when you're using chemicals, and it always doesn't work. It's not a long-term solution. So with the Aedes mosquito, since they're out during the day, we can't really use a treatment in the day for that. So we have to start with the bottom up, which is the larvae. So controlling the larvae is so much easier, and that's just dumping out water, using physical control, and mostly source reduction. And since we can't get to everyone's backyards, they've just been spreading like a wildfire. And like I said, when we first found them in Mission Viejo, it was because that nursery was selling all those bromeliads with the eggs on them. I will tell you, there was a study done in Florida, because that question is asked so many times. They actually netted off an area in Florida to see the effects mosquito had on the environment. And because there's millions of bugs all over the world, those animals that ate mosquitoes in the swamp just went to another bug source. You know, people say bats are a great control for mosquitoes. Not really. I mean, bats will eat mosquitoes, but if there's a huge juicy moth in the air, they're going to go for the steak, not the appetizer, right? So it didn't really have an effect, but I will say that male mosquitoes have a big job, and that's pollination. And even though we have bees and other flies that pollinate, they actually are part of the population crew or pollination crew, and they pollinate actually a lot of coffee. So I would say they serve some sort of purpose. The female, I consider a victim sometimes, because she doesn't know that she's transmitting diseases. She's just there to produce eggs. But I would say it is kind of a form of population control when it comes to animals. They will feed on sick caribou or other animals. In Alaska, they'll pretty much suck a caribou dry. There's so many swarms of mosquitoes. So I would say they don't serve the hugest purpose. If I don't know, you know, it can, the data can only be done if something were to happen. You know, if we really got rid of every single mosquito, and there's so many, we really can't do that sort of research. But they did in Florida, and there wasn't really a huge difference. We were hoping they were going to be seasonal, but they're so resilient. We have seen them even in low temperatures up to 60. Mosquitoes will go through a dormant stage, but they'll just go into the storm drains or underground. And we'll see them. We have an underground crew that goes through and treats the underground storm drains, because they'll just be on the ceiling waiting for the sun or any warmth to start rising, and they'll just pop out and start laying eggs. Our inspectors are finding larvae now. They find larvae in February that can actually stay dormant in cold water, and when it starts to warm up, then they'll start to go through the life cycle. So even larvae can go into a dormant stage in very cold water. We're starting to see the season go from June to August. Now it's starting to trickle up to April into October.
Wow.
So now, because of the Aedes mosquito, our season is starting to decrease. But I will say that we conduct mosquito control year round. People tend to get bit by this specific mosquito on the ankles. I've been bit by them on the arm, but I think it's because since they're such low flyers, they tend to go towards the ankles. A lot of other states like Florida, actually, their residents pay for area control, but we actually do not conduct aerial. The only form of control, and if you look on our website, we're a very transparent agency, but we actually conduct just wide area ground-based control. And if you look on our website too, it will show you when we've sprayed or treated anything. And that's just using usually BTI. We have spray trucks that if the only reason we would spray with the trucks is if we find a disease threat. So in those high risk areas that I mentioned before, we will notify the city, we'll notify the neighborhood if we are going to spray And the only time we would spray is very late at night for a couple hours. And that specific spray truck, that certain chemical, when the sun hits it, it's biodegradable. So we're not doing any sort of aerial spray. If you remember, I think in 2015, there was talk of us spraying, and that was declined.
Okay.
But now with new technology, we're bringing out a new drone system. We're bringing out an into care trap, which is our new 80s traps. Also, that's what I should talk about. If you are a resident and you do have a pest control companies are now starting the into care 80s traps. They do work. They're very efficient. From the studies that we've done, when we've put them out all over cities have now have contracts with other pest control companies for that. And it's just IN2 into care trap. But it tends to work. It only has 100-foot radius. And they do have to, take the treatments out and keep maintaining them. So there is, I think, a maintenance fee. But if you're having a really large issue with them, that's something that could help as well with the 80 species. Well, I started off first working for the LA Zoo. I was a zookeeper and I studied zoology. And believe it or not, a lot of people that work for vector control are biologists, ecologists, virologists. You can work in our lab. We test for diseases, which our microbiologists test for. A microbiologist is something I'm rooting for. I love what the microbiologist does for us. But we test for diseases for ticks, fleas. You want to be itchy, I can give you a flea and typhus presentation. but all sorts of things. We test for all sorts of different diseases with different vectors. We have a relationship with animal control, but I would say I worked at the LA Zoo. Then I started working for Long Beach City with their Park and Rec program, and Greater LA Vector Control started housing their chickens to test for West Nile. And I was taking care of them for them. I was like watching them. And I started talking to Vector Control and started collecting ravens for them that I would find with West Nile. And they said, hey, would you want to come and start a new program here? And I said, Vector Control, what is that? Like, what is it? Mosquitoes? And I'd always loved bugs. So I just started working for Vector Control and opened up this whole new world to me that I think a lot of people don't know everything that Vector Control does. There is a lot of science involved, a lot of data, surveillance. We're very science heavy. So we have scholars, we have UCI. I know there's the doctor from UCI that's going to be talking. All of his students come to us to intern to study diseases, to look at what our biologists are doing and our microbiologists. So if you want a really good job with full benefits, right, kids? One of our guys, his name is Savage. He came to our district with a school program. And he said, I want to do this. And now he has been there since he was 18 and he's 45.
How cool.
So and we have a school program. So kids, if you want to sign up for a school program, we actually have an education program coordinator on board, and she is doing virtual programs right now that are a lot of fun.
Awesome.
So kids, I highly suggest, if you are heavy into science, vector control is a career that can go really far. And it has a lot of different positions in it when it comes to science.